Welcome back, everybody. This is another lesson and talk in the series on community drumming facilitation. And the subject of today's talk is musical games. And that's another category that we could place under community drumming. And certainly we want to learn how to facilitate games because games are awesome. So in this talk, we're going to look at what defines a game. Why is a game different than other forms of drumming, like a drum circle or guided interactive drumming or a drum ensemble? We're not going to spend a lot of time differentiating it, but I think if we define it, you'll understand what makes it different from the other types of group drumming. We're also going to have an example I'm going to show you in a second. But what is a musical game? Well, a game, and this is a musical game, but let's leave the music part aside for a second. A game is any interactive process that people enter into voluntarily. So they agree to play the game. Two, they establish rules, and any game has what we call play rules, or sometimes they're referred to as givens. And you guys know what this is, but let's just cover it really quick. A game is usually played in a game space, and that could be a board like chess, checkers, Monopoly. It could be a field, a tennis field or a soccer field, football field, baseball diamond, whatever it is. And then it has rules to it, right? We're going to use this type of device. We're going to have this size ball. We're going to have this net. We have to put the ball over the net. It can also have timed boundaries, like segments that are timed. It can have a certain number of points that get reached, and then something happens, like when you're playing ping pong or something, first team to 21, right? So there's all sorts of different rules. And also, I think third, and maybe it's fourth by now, there's some sort of common goal that you're trying to reach, right? And so a game can be, literally won or lost by points. It can be more adversarial. It can also be cooperative. There's such a thing as cooperative games. For example, you can have team games where one team wins and one team loses. That could be volleyball. You could also play a game on a volleyball court with a volleyball where the goal on both sides is to not let the ball hit the ground. And in that way, but then you could say, but it can only bounce 3 times on one side and it has to go back to the other side. So in that way, it becomes a cooperative game where there's a group goal with everybody either kind of winning or losing together. And so there's lots of ways that a game can manifest. But basically, a game has play rules, which are in many ways very restrictive, right? They're boundaries. So it's very different than a drum circle where people decide how they want to participate and what they do and how they contribute. A game gives people specific tools, specific ways to use those tools. It usually has some way to measure progress, whether that's points or literal distance, like winning a race, being farther along, or think about tug of war. That could be a physical measurement. It often does have a time limit, not always, but think about children playing. They play a lot of games, but they don't usually have points and time. But there's a goal. So let's just review what makes a game: rules, play rules or givens, a certain space or playing area, which is part of the rules or the givens. And then we have agreement on what the rules are, and we agree to abide by the rules. So everybody who's playing the game agrees to follow the rules. And that doesn't mean the rules can't change. And often when children play, they change the rules all the time. But in order for everybody, if it involves multiple people, in order for everybody to play the game moving forward, everybody still needs to agree to the new rules, which then become the rules. So let's just say everybody agrees to the rules. So that doesn't mean they can't ever change. And then there's some sort of common goal that people are working towards. So let's look at an example of one of the games from the collection of games that you all, as patrons of the channel, have access to, and that would be under the Drum Fun Musical Games for Groups category, and you have full access to the whole DVD. It's a 2 DVD set, so that's like 24, 25 different videos with different games. Here's one of them. This one is called Rumble Ball, and we're going to go to that, and we'll be back in a second. Here we go. right, nice. So tell me, what is the quality of the ball when it's tossed up into the air? Give me some adjectives to describe that. What is that like? High.
Light.
Light. Airy. Mm-hmm.
Free.
Free. Great, those are great words. So what types of instruments here do we have that make that type of light, airy, free, high sound? Can you find something here? The jingles? Could be nice. Oh, okay, great. So how about when we have the ball going up like that, just those sounds play? Okay, let's practice a little bit. Ready? All right, perfect. Now, when I bounce the ball on the ground, what is that like? And I think we're there. Okay, so that was an example of a game, and you saw some process there. So let's talk about that for a little bit. When you present a game, now you can have, a game is a recipe, and anytime we're facilitating something that is prescriptive or a recipe, there's always a challenge, and we need to balance. I'm just going to make sure the audio is off for this video because I think it's still playing. We need to make sure that we balance, directives or a didactic process, which is letting everybody know, okay, here's what we're going to do, and here's what you're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. We need to balance instructions, which are, let's be honest, they're basically commands, and they're, people follow instructions. So we need to balance that part of it with the creative side of people there in the group being able to take some ownership and have some volition, have some sense of agency, because it's their group and people have ideas and people have different ideas and at different times even, so on different days. So the game, even though the game is a structure, how it actually unfolds and what happens with the game, in this case, what sounds do people use, what instruments do they have, those are choices that you can help your participants make, and you can involve them like I did in this video. So giving prompts, asking questions can be really important to the establishment of how a game is going to unfold, and that's how you can make a game, I think, more fun, certainly more personalized to a group in many ways. And what you can use instruments, you can use voices, you can incorporate movement, you can have all sorts of things happening within the scope of the plan of the game, right? So there's lots of different ways to play the game. I like to look for aspects of the game that can be customized. So I might give the participants options. And again, sometimes you want to constrain it to a range or a certain set of options. Like, for example, sometimes I teach a game, and before we go to the instruments, I might do the game in a standing circle with no instruments or anything, just voices or body percussion. And that could be a choice. Let's use our voices, but what kind of sounds should we make? Or what sounds should we make for the low sound? What sounds should we make for the high sound? And, get some input, and then maybe you have a couple different choices. Or you just let everybody know, okay, make your own sound for when the ball goes up in the air, make your own sound for when the ball rolls. You can start there. You can ask the group, okay, between this sound and that sound, which ones do you guys want to have? And give people choices and hone it in. You can certainly do that. Then you can move to instruments. So there's a little bit of an upgrade there. And that idea, by the way, goes for most things that we do in music. You can always start with voices and body percussion and move into just about any other musical experience. But let's look now at how we take the game, now that we've kind of talked about what constitutes a game. and put it in a musical context. Why play a musical game at all? Why don't we just learn rhythms, do ensembles, or just have a drum circle jam, or do guided interactive drumming, or do drum play, or do one of the other forms of community drumming? Well, games are familiar to people. They do provide a structure which many people find comforting, and people seem to enjoy playing games too because of some of the things I mentioned earlier. Like there's a common goal, there's a task, that you're trying to achieve, and it can be trivial, like just sending a sound around the group and seeing how fast we can do it. Right? Very, very basic. Everybody makes one sound, and then you just see how fast the sound can go around, or following the motions of a conductor, whether that's an actual person or a person playing with a ball, or something in nature with no person. Just follow, something that's happening. I was at a conference years ago, and there was a shaft of light that was coming through a fan or a vent in this, like those twirly bird vents in the ceiling, and there was light hitting the floor, but the fan was going, so the light was kind of pulsing like this. And similar to the one you just saw with Rumble Ball, I said, follow the light. I just said, follow the light. And the light was pulsing. So people played, and then I put my hand over the shaft of light and it would disappear, right? Because I was blocking it, and they stopped. And then I moved my hand and it would stop. It's just basic conducting, but it's using things in the environment. And generally speaking, people have fun with that. It's exciting. Because they're not really sure what's coming up, what's going to happen, when's the light going to come back on, when's it going to stop. There's a music educator, Artie Almeida, and she has a lot of activities, and sometimes I would categorize it as an activity, not necessarily a game. And I want to talk about that in a second. What makes it an activity and what makes it a game? But she has things that she's done where she'll have the lights out, and then she'll take a big flashlight, and she has posters or murals and things up on the walls and even on the ceiling. And she'll shine the light on it, and it might have a symbol or an idea or some concept that literally gets illuminated, and it gets the spotlight put on it. And then the students, in this case it's elementary school, and the students would then do that, right? So whatever that is, you could do it with rhythms, you could do it with instruments, you could do it with sounds or textures, timbre, dynamics, any kind of thing that has a musical response built in. You could do that, right? So basically it's conducting. Now, in that case, where you're giving people kind of an on-off, choice, or you're even just conducting people to play one of, say, 3 or 4 different things at random. I don't think of that so much as a game as I do an activity, in as much as people are kind of in a performing mode there, and they're taking direct cues from a conductor, essentially. So that is a very leader-follower kind of relationship. And I would also put that in the category of group action, group followership, rather than a game that everybody's playing together. And I hope that makes sense. So a game where people play together, you would see people interacting with each other. What they do is based on a dynamic relationship with each other, like the game Flocks and Socks, for example, or I Am the Drum, where you can have random leaders. Things are starting and stopping based on what the group is doing. There's Ships in the Night, for example, where you have partners and somebody's guiding somebody else with sound, and it's a lot more dynamic. And there's more things that affect more things in the process, rather than just one leader and then everybody following that one leader. All right. Nevertheless, games can be really fun for some of the reasons I mentioned. Games can be used to elicit and promote social interactions, musical expression. You can even use games in a way that gives a space and a time for sharing of ideas, concepts, something that somebody's sharing of themselves. That would be more maybe that's more of a talk session, maybe in a therapeutic session setting. or a support group or something like that. But all of these things are available. All these directions of pursuit and movement are available from the center idea, which is this musical game. You can use different instruments. There's opportunities for learning within a game. Games don't always have to be void of educational material. They can certainly include learning opportunities. They can include specific musical concepts and the development of those concepts. For example, there's one game that we do called Four on the Floor. That's my name for it. It's where you have a traveling quartet that goes around the group, and every 16 beats or so, I mean, you can decide how many. See, that's one of the play rules. Every 16 beats, we add a new player, and then the player who's been playing the longest, who was the fourth player added, would stop, right? So we add a player, we take a player away. So there's always four moving around the group, and that change happens, say, every 16 beats. And that, in and of itself, is pretty fun, but it's challenging, too, because everybody has to count, everybody has to know when has 16 beats gone by, when have four phrases of 4 beats or 4 bars gone by, and that's a musical sensibility. It's a musical skill to be able to count and feel a phrase of 16 beats or four measures, which really relates to a lot of music in a very real and useful way. So even though we're playing a game, we're counting, we're paying attention, we're taking turns, we're getting a chance to play, we're listening, we're helping our peers count. We're doing a lot of things that translate directly into formal music making, whether that's improvisation or playing in an ensemble, learning a piece or doing guided interactive drumming. Participating in guided interactive drumming, etc. So there are certainly, games are not all about just having fun and nothing else. Games can be used in lots of different ways. I think of games, and here's something for you to consider, I think of games as, I would use the term extra musical, not as in they're super musical, like extra musical, as in extra as in aside from. Or pre-musical, you could think of them as pre-musical or pre-music making experiences, where it's not, the music is not the goal. The music is not the product, whereas in an ensemble or in an improvisation, the musical product could be the goal, right? We could be going for the most aesthetically pleasing music to us, or to an audience. We could be going for a performance of a piece, or we could be going for some sort of aesthetic that is all about the music, and that's the goal. But in this case, the game is usually the playing of the game is the main thing, and the interactions are kind of the focus, and the musical sounds that result are usually a byproduct of that, right? So that makes sense, right? So that's why I think of them as extra musical or pre-musical, like precursors. Because if you play a game like Rumble Ball, you're still working on single hits, rolls, maybe other kinds of sounds. You're paying attention, which helps you focus. You're following a leader, which helps you pay attention to other people around you. You're being creative. You're responding. You have to exercise impulse control. You're also part of a group, so you get the group feeling. There's lots of things that are happening there that are positive, and we want to encourage that. But at the same time, if you just had a recording of people playing Rumble Ball, I'm not sure that would be a piece of music that you would go to, if you wanted to just hear music and listen to the music and enjoy it. I mean, maybe, why not? But that's a very personal choice. I would say it's probably low on the musical enjoyment continuum, but to each his own. I mean, nothing wrong with the sound. It's just probably not as enjoyable as a drum ensemble piece or a piece where people were actively trying to create music for music's sake. All right, but we don't know. That being said, that's all subjective. So let's just recap some of the things we talked about, and I'll give you some ideas of how you can use musical games in your work. And then if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. But let's review. So a game is something that we play. It has rules, play rules. It has a setting, a board or a field or a court or some sort of terrain. It's got certain things that we use to play the game, whether that's a lot of games have balls. It's a ball, it's a bat, it's a racket, it's a whatever. There's nets, there's goals, there's baskets, there's tracks, there's lines, and then there's time. How long is this going to go on? How long do we have? There could be physical, measurable goals, like do we reach the top of the mountain? Are we going the fastest? What are we doing? And then we voluntarily enter into the game, understanding what the rules are and using the tools in accordance with the rules. We don't break the rules. And I think that's really an important concept too, that we agree to play the game. And you could look up game theory, or another thing that you could look up would be theater improv. There's lots of games that come out of theater improv, where the rules can be very simple but very freeing, very open. There's lots of things that you can do within a very simple set of rules. So the rules are there not to constrain, but in a lot of ways to actually liberate people and give them freedom within structure. And when I first started talking about this, I talked about how the structure can give people a sense of freedom, actually, because they know what to do. They're not guessing. When you give people too many options, sometimes they just get shut down. They're not sure what to do. I don't know what to do. But if you give somebody 2 or 3 ways of participating, and you explain to them, okay, well, you can do this or this or this, then they can just do it. They can choose one and go for it. So in that way, it's liberating. So we have the rules, we have the setting, we have a common goal. We understand what the goal is. So it's not just that we're using the tools and just that we're following the rules, but there's some greater goal in mind that we're trying to reach. So in that way, we have this achievement factor. And that, again, it could be competitive, it could be adversarial, or it could be everyone, trying together to do something as a group. So I'll give you one example of a again, it's not really a game. It's kind of a game. But it was a little bit of a trick that I used to play. I admit it. It was a little manipulative. If I would use that, it wasn't really manipulative. It was just a challenge. Because I was doing this, I was doing some music classes, music drumming groups for elementary school, and I was a traveling musician going from class to class. And these are first grade, second grade, third grade, so you can imagine, okay, here comes Mr. Kalani with a bunch of stuff. Let's goof around because now we don't know this guy and we can get away with, fidgeting and being fidgety and kind of, joking with our friend. I mean, stuff I used to do when I was that age. So, but I had this trick up my sleeve and I would say, you know what? I bet you guys can't even be quiet for 10 seconds. And they would say, yes, we can. And I said, I don't think you can. And so the game was on, right? Challenge was on. And we'd just look at the clock on the wall and I would say, okay, not a sound for 10 seconds. And that was to the whole class. So the whole class had to be super quiet. And it was really interesting because now all of the students were policing each other and they were like, we got to do it. We got to do it. So just a very simple rule, no sound for 10 seconds. And they were all in. And that was the goal, right? And so you just throw down the challenge. Now, of course, to me, it was like, okay, first of all, I want them to show me that they can actually sit and not, make a bunch of extraneous noise because, trying to explain things or talk about something, there's a lot of noise going on. So I knew if I could get them to do that, not only would I celebrate them doing it, but then I could also say, well, I know you guys can be quiet because you just did it. So they had no excuse at that point. So that was why it was a little manipulative, but it's all good. It's all for the greater good. So that was another example of a musical game in a way, just trying to be quiet for 10 seconds. Because if you can do 10, you can do a minute. And if you can do a minute, you can do 10 minutes. So you see how this works? All right. So again, you can do games in different settings, in different ways. You don't have to recreate a game the way you learned it or the way you originally designed it or the way you did it the last time. And I think if I want to leave you with a couple concepts for you to try is, first of all, as you develop your own facilitation skills, try these things out. And you can do a game with 2 people or 3 people. Most of these games are just very simple. The concepts are pretty simple. You don't need a huge group of people to do these. So try it out so you understand what the dynamics are. There's no edits in these videos. You can understand what the dynamics are, how it feels to participate. That's super important, you guys. I really recommend that you not try to lead people through any process in which you have not yourself been a participant. Very important, all right? So try these things out and be a participant in them, or even let somebody else, take turns leading some of these things so you get both perspectives. Also, that's important so you understand what is the information that people need when you're delivering the instructions. How can you do it effectively and efficiently and do it in the least amount of time possible? Because here's the other thing about games, and that is people want to play. They don't want to listen to you explaining a bunch of stuff, right? So 2 things. One is that you can scaffold or you can layer games. And you saw me do that. At first, I would say with the ball, I might say, okay, follow the ball, right, with your instrument. And then I would just do things with the ball. Then I would pause a little. So that gives people a chance to play. Then I might take a minute and say, okay, what do you think about if we had 3 different sounds? And see there, I'm differentiating now. Let's have a sound for the ball going up in the air. Let's have one for the rolling on the ground. Let's have one for bouncing. But they've already been playing. We're not trying to skip to the end when we do a game necessarily. So think about ways that you can get people playing right away, doing something with maybe just one rule, one little simple guide, like follow the ball. Then you can kind of chop it up a little bit and you can put in more rules. Like if the ball goes up in the air, let's only use our voices, no instruments, and start to differentiate more, start to have more variety. Ask people what they think. What are some other things what are some other sounds or what are some other actions that the ball is making that you could have a sound for? And some people might say, well, when you grab it, when you catch it, right? Or when you spin it or whatever, when the ball's going this way around. So that's the other big takeaway, and I mentioned this at the beginning, is when you facilitate things, ask your participants for ideas. Ask them for suggestions. I like to check in with my participants if I'm giving instructions. We're about to play a game. Presumably, I just described the game, how we play it. Do you have any questions? Does that seem clear? Anybody have any questions about that? So check in with your people. And if somebody's still confused, try to address it. Or you could say, well, let's just do it for a second and then, see if it makes sense to you. And we'll come back. And if you have any questions after a minute, I'll answer it then. But I think music also tends to speak for itself. I mean, when people see something, it's actually easier, I think, to just do a game sometimes, enter into it, with maybe 1 or 2 easy, prompts or instructions, and then break it down after you've familiarized yourself or after your participants have familiarized themselves with the play space, with the tools that you're using, with some of the dynamic elements that are going to be in the game, right? Especially if you're doing something like a conference for people who are not musicians, who have not used the instruments. They're totally new. They don't know anything. And so you don't want to overwhelm them with a bunch of rules and then try to play a game on stuff they've never even picked up. So you want to introduce games with the mindset of what information is new for people, what are they going to be doing that they may not be familiar with, and keep that stuff to a minimum. So don't load up people with too much data and stuff they have to remember. Because the other side of a game is people can get it wrong, right? I mean, how many of us have ever started to play a game and we're just confused and we get out? It's like when you're playing a game and all of a sudden somebody tags you and you're like, you're out. And like, I didn't even know we started yet, you know? Remember that feeling? So you don't want to have that happen. You don't want to have people completely lost. So that's another reason you want to just work into some things gently. You can also introduce certain concepts and then play the game. You can mix and match it however you think it makes the most sense. Finally, like I mentioned, you can use games as like a warm-up, as a pre-musical experience, and then go into more formalized music making. You could use it to kind of break up stuff maybe in the middle of a lesson where you've been learning something and it's been more intellectual or more achievement-oriented, like learning a piece of music or a song, and then introduce a game as just kind of a refresher, you know, a little sorbet in between courses, if you will, just something quick and light. You can also use it at the end of the day, at the end of an experience, or an activity period, or a session, or a conference, or a meeting, where you just need to just shake off, dust everything off, do a little breathing, do a little laughing, and kind of lift your spirit a little bit before you go on your way, before you send your people on their way. And that's the last thing I want to point out, is that when we play games, one of the things that usually happens, hopefully, is that people will laugh and they'll have fun. Why? Because we laugh when we're being clumsy, or we laugh when things are unexpected happen. I mean, even if it's a nervous laugh, right? It's still laughter. We laugh at ourselves all the time. I mean, that's healthy, I think. So even, the game is an opportunity to kind of stumble and fumble your way through something, which is awesome. Nothing wrong with that. And it's just, you're just having fun playing a game, right? The points don't matter. It doesn't matter. Even if there's A and B and you're competing a little bit, it doesn't matter. It's all good. Because it really is about playing the game, right? It's not about winning. It's not about the trophy, all right? It's just, engaging in the activity and being in the moment and having that feeling, being in the flow state, which is another benefit, really being in the moment and being engaged in something. And that's another big benefit of music making, active music making, whether it's in the formal side or the game side or whatever it is. Okay, so that's a little bit about games, musical games. I hope that you also understand a little bit of what makes a musical game different from, improvised drumming like a drum circle, studying and performing like an ensemble, following a leader with very specific guidelines and musical structures like interactive drumming, doing things like a drum along where you're just following the form of a song and singing a song. These are all a little bit different. So games are games. Enjoy them. You can certainly integrate them into a program where you intersperse, some drum circle stuff, maybe guided interactive drumming, maybe a drum along, a couple games. Awesome. And then make them your own. Whatever game you learn, if it's from me or somebody else, make it your own and let your participants make it their own. All right? Thanks for being a patron. Thanks for being enrolled in the courses level tier. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach me.